Hello folks, this is a surprise lockdown special. Some new equipment courtesy of eBay, and whilst I was experimenting with it I came up with this little program, inspired to some extent by the address where we have our meetings, Nelson Lane. I've tried a couple of new ideas, and if they work I hope you enjoy it. The Nelson Touch, or Why I Would Never Play Poker with Horatio. For the non-poker players, that's a royal flush. Nothing can beat that hand. When I was younger, I played a mean hand of poker. I have neither the nerve nor the money to play now. But if I played Nelson, I would think he had this sort of hand every time, and after I'd thrown my hand in, I would find that he got this. Of course I would want to kill him, but what would be the point? The point is, never play poker with Horatio. History calls him brave. His contemporaries called him lucky. History calls him a hero. His contemporaries called him a fool. History celebrates his victories. His contemporaries feared being killed for his reputation. History calls him a leader of men. His contemporaries called him a glory hunter. He lost an eye at the siege of Calvi on the island of Corsica in 1794, but he still led the attack home. He lost an arm in Tenerife in 1797, and he was back at his post in half an hour. He enjoyed dangerous affairs with married women, but was never called out. He seduced the British ambassador's wife only a few months after they were married. He led his band of brothers by persuading them he couldn't lose. He pushed his luck on the basis of his analysis of the situation. He usually played a medium hand, and he always went all in. Would you play poker with him? At Cape St. Vincent, he sailed right through the middle of the Spanish fleet when captaining the frigate HMS Minerve without being challenged. Even though Sir John Jarvis was an admiral and Sir William Parker was a rear admiral, he, a mere commodore, recommended attacking the Spanish immediately. For the battle he recommended to his superiors, he captained his own ship, HMS Captain, 74 guns. The odds were 2-1 in favour of the Spanish fleet. The Royal Navy ships advanced, literally in a fog. When the fog lifted, Admiral Jervis saw the odds were 2-1 against. Don't play poker with Horatio would be my advice. Admiral Jarvis was in HMS Victory. It didn't belong to Nelson yet. He signalled form line ahead and astern of Victory when most convenient. This meant that he was going to lead a line of battleships in turn behind him. He signalled, Admiral intends to pass through enemy lines. He signalled, engage the enemy in succession astern of Victory. These are all quite clear instructions for anyone who knew the Naval Code Book. Nelson went his own way. Don't play poker with Horatio would be my advice. The Spanish had formed two lines of ships. Jervis ordered the British fleet to go between them and turn in succession to engage the enemy astern of him. But then came the Nelson touch. What on earth's he doing? Where's he going? Good heavens, what's he doing? I'll have him. Good Lord! For disobeying orders in the British Navy, you got beaten, flogged, hanged, or even shot, and Admiral Byng had recently been shot on his own quarterdeck. But then Nelson brought his ship alongside the St. Nicholas, boarded her, and took her. And when the San Joseph came up to help the San Nicholas, he boarded and took her as well, just for good measure. It became known as Nelson's Patent Boarding Bridge. You go across one captured enemy ship to board another and capture that. The British won the battle and captured 4 ships. 2 of them were down to Nelson. As the fleet passed the San Joseph, with Nelson still aboard, every man cheered. Jervis was made Baron Jervis of Mayford and Earl St. Vincent. Nelson had blatantly disobeyed Jervis's orders, but he wasn't hanged. He was knighted as a member of the Order of the Bath. His promotion to Rear Admiral was not a reward, but simply a happy coincidence. Oh yeah, sure. Don't play poker with Horatio would be my advice. After a series of battles up and down the Mediterranean, Napoleon invaded Egypt. He landed his army and sent the ships to the Nile Delta. The haven is covered by heavy guns. He parks his ships in Aboukir Bay, close up to the shallows. On the night of the 1st and 2nd of August 1798, Nelson, without a pilot and without a light, led his band of brothers through the shallows to attack the enemy fleet. The French ship Orient explodes. Not even Horatio Hornblower, in one of his novels, would risk an entire fleet in an enemy's anchorage. But Nelson did. What's more, he persuaded his band of brothers to go with him. 2 French ships of the line were destroyed. Nine ships of the line were captured. Two French frigates were destroyed. 4 French ships escaped. 4,000 Frenchmen died, and nearly 4,000 more were captured. 680 British seamen paid the price for Nelson's reputation, but he won the battle. The French flagship L'Orient made an impressive display. All hands were lost, but the bang was loud. Don't play poker with Horatio, would be my advice. Admiral Sir Hyde Parker was sent with 30 ships in front of Copenhagen to break a coalition of Denmark, Sweden, Russia and Prussia, which was under French control. He gave Nelson control of his 12 ships of the line to reconnoitre the Danish positions. You know what's coming. Nelson saw this as an opportunity and went into the attack. Nelson brought his ships below the middle ground, they then weathered the point and came into the channel where the Danish fleet was parked. The gunnery became intense and very smoky. Hyde Parker, yes, that really was his name, Hyde Parker, on his flagship some distance away, could see the smoke but not the action. He sent a signal to Nelson to say he should retire from the battle. Nelson put his telescope to his blind eye and said, "I see no signal," and carried on the fight. Don't play poker with Horatio will be my advice. On the Danish side, there have been 3 ships sunk, 12 ships captured, 367 men killed, and after the battle, the flagship exploded and took a further 250 lives. On the side of the British, no ships were sunk, 3 ran aground but were refloated after the battle. 254 men were killed. Nelson was lucky again. But when it came to Trafalgar in 1805, he really should have been soundly beaten. He did nothing right and went entirely against the book of tactics for sail in warfare. Firstly, he dashed off to the West Indies, missed the French, and had to come dashing back again. Careless or what? At Trafalgar, he was in HMS Victory, Admiral of the Fleet in the Fleet flagship. HMS Victory had 100 guns, but they all pointed on the sides. The Victory had no effective fire fore and aft. The arc of fire was at right angles to the ship. This meant that ships sailed side by side in line of battle, hence they were called liners, and shot at each other until one or the other gave out. The worst thing an admiral could do was to let a line of battleships get across his line of sailing. They could shoot all their guns, he could shoot none. It was called Crossing the T. Gotcha. Now look at Nelson's battle plan for Trafalgar. 2 columns of British ships heading straight into the broadsides of the combined Franco-Spanish fleet. He deliberately let them cross his T. No admiral in his right mind would allow this. What's more, the winds were very light, almost calm. The British fleet was under fire from the enemy for almost half an hour and unable to reply. Every time a captain tried to force the pace, as with Eucalyptus, Nelson reprimanded him and ordered him to keep station. A frighteningly slow progress into what men knew would be a terrifying battle. And Nelson, pacing the quarterdeck, in the full dress uniform of an admiral of the fleet, calmly giving instructions to Victory's Captain Hardy to head for the Bucentaure, the French flagship. It's little wonder that Admiral Collingwood got a little annoyed when he saw Nelson flying the signal, "England expects every man this day will do his duty." "What does he think we will do?" was his response. But the reason why I, and probably none of his captains, would ever play poker with him is because he took some enormous gambles. But every time he gambled, he had carefully analysed the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. He knew exactly how to exploit them. He knew exactly how strong his hand was, even when it was a weak one. And he knew where his enemy was weakest, even in his strength. The gun deck of a man of war was ridiculously cramped and very dangerous. The guns jumped back 7 or 8 feet when they fired. Boys running around with full gunpowder charges. Men humping 60-pound cannonballs off racks towards the guns. Men using the various rods and tattle to swab out the barrel, load the charge, load the wadding, load the ball, ram everything home nice and tight, prick the bag, prime the charge, run out, wait for the uproll or the word of command, and fire. Some of the guns weighed more than half a ton and needed 7 or 8 men to handle them. Each man had a task to perform. Each task must be done in the right way, in the right order and at the right time, taking the right amount of time. 7 or 8 men working in perfect harmony as a team, each dependent on the other. A mistake could cost someone a finger, a hand, an arm, a leg, a head, a torso, a life. And a serious mistake could cost the gun and all the crew, or even the ship. Even in 1916, at the Battle of Jutland, a mistake in handling ammunition in the magazine caused the total destruction of 3 of the Navy's battleships. This took practice. Hours and hours of gun drill, with the sea in every type of condition and the officers in every kind of mood. Going through the motions or actually firing live rounds. Nelson's Navy practiced gun drills at least 3 times a day in harbour and at least 5 times a day at sea. Sometimes they would drill at the guns for an hour against an officer's watch until they had achieved the time that he wanted. Nelson knew the French had been bottled up in harbour for weeks and the Spanish for months. He knew their gunnery would be slow and ragged. Not just hoped, he actually knew this. And he knew that the British fleet, sailing closer, the gunnery of the Spanish and French would become even more ragged as they panicked at the close proximity of the target. A Royal Navy gun crew could fire 3 well-aimed shots every 2 minutes. The French were only half that good at their best. The Spanish were lucky if they could fire 1 round every 7 minutes. Besides firing cannonballs, a naval cannon could fire a bewildering array of special shots for special targets. Or it could just bang off with a bag full of musket balls or pistol balls that at close range would spread out like a massive shotgun blast and carry everything before them. But a cannon was not the precise weapon that Hollywood, in their films, sometimes makes it. You've seen Hornblower's gunner leaning over the barrel and squinting down at a target that's 3 miles away, firing his gun and knocking down the mast. Well, that's almost impossible. Even the best gunners could sometimes have difficulty hitting the proverbial barn door. The cannon is muzzle loaded. That means that the cannonball goes in at the front end. This means that to fit down the barrel, the ball's diameter must be less than the diameter of the cannon's bore. That's why the cannonball had to be wadded. The gunpowder charge is either put in a canvas paper bag or laden in with a special scoop. How much powder goes in is critical to the range and hitting power of the cannonball, and the powder ignition can affect the rate of burn. It's likely to bounce off the sides of the barrel as it leaves the cannon. If you're lucky, it will go where you aimed it. But if the last little bounce knocked the ball a fraction off centre, then a whole variety of shots can occur. How much powder is loaded and how much of the powder burns before the ball leaves the barrel will also affect the range. Powder just right, burn just right, bang. Not enough powder, or the burn is too slow and the ball ends up in the water. Too much powder, or the burn is too fast and the ball goes over the top of the target. Much too much powder and the cannon explodes. It's the powder monkey's fault, sir, honest. With all these variables, even a good cannoneer could not control their shots perfectly, so it was the weight of shot that counted. How many cannonballs could you shoot at the enemy in a given time? Nelson knew that once his fleet had got into action, he would pound the enemy to pieces by sheer volume of fire. Nelson's fleet could put far more cannonballs into the enemy than they could reply with. And as the last piece of destructive devilry before the business of slugging it out began, there was the carronade and the double-shotted cannon. The carronade was a very big gun. On Victory and on most ships of the line there were at least 2 carronades firing over the bow quarters. It fired a massive cannonball. But the cannonball was not solid. It was filled with musket balls, and it either burst as soon as it left the barrel, or it burst when it hit something. These shots were lighter than cannonballs, so the carronade could be much heavier in weight and still cope with the shot. Literally a giant shotgun. The carronade could fire a bigger shot over a shorter range than a cannon. So, good close in, useless at distance. Double shotting was literally putting 2 balls in the cannon together, in every cannon on the ship. It took time to load properly, so it was usually only used for the first shot. To make the first shot really count, you waited until you could rake the enemy. Passing astern of an enemy and firing down the length of the gun deck created a moment of havoc. Imagine 200 cannonballs and a blast of musket balls coming down the 100 feet of this deck in a couple of minutes. Second thoughts, no. Perhaps we shouldn't imagine it. The gun deck is where the sailors ate, slept, worked, played, and fought. A raking shot gave Nelson a full house of casualties. That's what a full house looks like. But on this occasion, his opponent had a royal flush. Seeing the Victory would soon cross their stern and rake them, the officers of the Bucentaur sent as many men as possible into the rigging and on the tops. With as many men as possible armed with muskets. Victory did her work. The shattering blow ran down Bucentaur's decks. But with everyone up top aiming at the little man in the full-dress admiral's uniform, this was bound to happen. Nelson was shot, the bullet broke his back and went into his lungs, liver and gut. He was taken to the orlop deck, where he stayed alive just long enough to know he had won a great and glorious victory. And Victory limped away. The Battle of Trafalgar was a shattering display of battleships fighting to a bitter end. Nelson's victory was absolute. Britain's sea power was not challenged again for more than 100 years. At the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson and Admiral Collingwood marshalled 33 ships. 27 were ships of the line, 4 were frigates used for conveying signals between the two columns. The French had 18 ships of the line and 8 other ships. The Spanish had 15 ships of the line, but several of the Spanish ships disengaged before the action really started. I won't read out the casualties, you can read those for yourself. But notice, the French had 1 ship destroyed and 10 ships captured, and the Spanish had 9 ships captured. 19 ships captured by Nelson's fleet. But don't dwell on what has passed away. Nelson was given a massive send-off at St. Paul's Cathedral, but his child was neglected, his mistress was scorned, and his wife left in genteel poverty. I would not play poker with Horatio Nelson because he was brave, calculating, skilled, prompt in action, charismatic, inspirational, and above all, lucky. Probably the best sailor admiral that Britain will ever know. Well, there we go. Another lockdown special. Hope you enjoyed it. The inspiration for it comes from what for me has been almost a lifetime of wargaming with little ships. I've fought many of Nelson's battles. I've never beaten him, and I've never lost when I've been playing the part of Nelson. I can actually still put every ship that fought at Trafalgar on a table for a war game. So this has been a pleasure. Hope the new equipment's worked well. Hope to see you again soon. Stay safe, stay home, stay healthy, and all the best. Bye.